I did it again. Hello and welcome back to the JournalismAI Festival. My name is Mattia, as most of you know by now, and I am known for not unmuting myself at the right time, but too bad, 3 minutes, 3 seconds of your life you're not going to get back. I'm really excited to be here again with you all for this last session of day 3 of the JournalismAI Festival out of 5. Very soon, I'm going to introduce 4 fantastic speakers who will be with me in this session. Before I do that, some of our usual reminders in the introduction. So the JournalismAI Festival is a celebration of the most exciting developments at the intersection of journalism and artificial intelligence. It's organized by us, the JournalismAI team at Polis, which is the journalism think tank at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and it's funded by the Google News Initiative. At journalismai.info, you're going to find everything about what we do, the research, reports, and projects we have done, training courses and online programs for journalists, the collaborative initiatives that we have been running in 2020 and this year, and that you are learning everything about at this festival with some of the sessions, and so much more as well. How to enjoy the festival? Well, first of all, you're in the right place. You're on YouTube listening to us, and via the live chat, you can ask all your questions to the speakers throughout the session. Don't wait till the end to ask your questions. Just jot them down in the chat as soon as they come to your mind, and we'll pick them up when Q&A comes. And also, please join the community on Telegram at t.me/journalismai. You will find more than 500 journalists and news innovators from every corner of the globe learning together about artificial intelligence and how it can help us make journalism better and stronger. And if you share what you're learning on social media from the festival, please use the hashtag JournalismAI. And remember, you can always go back to check the program of the remaining sessions of the festival at journalismaifestival.com. If you're not signed up yet for the newsletter, you should do that, and you're going to find the link in all our websites and materials. We have a challenge going on in the team about whether we're going to reach 4,000 subscribers by the end of the year. We are close, so help us get there by telling your colleagues, your relatives, your dogs, and everyone else. And just one last note, very serious, be open, be curious, and be kind. That's our motto for this festival. We're all here learning together. AI is a complex topic to address, so there are no such thing as stupid questions. If you want to ask anything that is not clear from the sessions, please do so. And always remember, we come from different backgrounds, different countries, different levels of knowledge about AI and so on. So let's all be kind to each other and make the most of this learning journey. Finally, you stop hearing me blubbering about things because I can introduce our speakers and the session of today. We're here to talk about how to make the most of AI for your newsroom, a session we co-designed with the Associated Press. And for that reason, I'm very pleased to introduce you to Aimee Rinehart from the AP, who will be the moderator for the day. And also we'll have the honor of introducing our 3 speakers. So Aimee, thank you so much for being a fantastic ally for us in this occasion. And I leave the floor to you.
Thanks so much, Mattia. It's great to be part of the Journalism AI Festival and to share some of our experiences working with technologies and automation, many of which include artificial intelligence. As Mattia said, I work at the Associated Press, which pioneered, along with the company Automated Insights, natural language generation with earnings reports in 2014. What does that mean? Well, AP went from filing 300 reports to 3,000, which was a huge boon for our readers, for AP members, and the company that had previously been left unreported upon. So it also freed up our business reporting team to do deeper reporting and analysis pieces. And I'm happy to report the big question we always get, there were no job cuts to the team. This project ended up being a win-win-win. So I'm now leading the AP's Local News AI program, which is a 2-year NITE-funded initiative. We're currently asking U.S. local newsrooms to submit an AI readiness scorecard. So get your pens and pencils ready. If you're in a local newsroom, the URL to submit your scorecard is ap.org/local-AI. We'll put that in the comment section just to make sure that you have it, but I wanted to make sure for US newsrooms, we're interested in learning about what you're doing in terms of automation and artificial intelligence. Based on the scorecard, we'll create a course in the spring, then consult with 5 newsrooms for 1 year to identify opportunities to use automation and AI, implement and assess that. In this program, we hope to extend this current community of practice. And Mattia said in the beginning, there's all kinds of ways to connect, and we hope to plug into that as well. So now I'd like to introduce you to our panel, a group of fearless leaders and innovators who are in the service of expanding newsroom resources and reach in the face of an unending onslaught of information. Cynthia DuBose is managing editor of audience engagement at McClatchy, which is a group of 29 newspapers in the United States. She led 3 AI projects this year with customized tools that use automation and AI for things like real estate listings, data visualization, and high school sports. Allred is president of Source Media Properties, which includes 3 local news sites in the US state of Ohio. He also heads Lead AI, an artificial intelligence startup that produces high school sports articles that Cynthia uses at McClatchy, among many other newsrooms. Pedro Burgos is a professor of communication and journalism at Insper in Brazil, and the developer of many automations like automated engagement reports for the Marshall Project and an automated fact-checking bot for Aos Fatos called Fatima. Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right in. I was so excited to pull this group together because I feel like many of you created these or integrated these programs into your newsroom because you saw a need and you filled it. So necessity being the mother of invention, you all have a need in your news operations and either outright invented something like Pedro and Jay, or found tools to customize like Cynthia. So can you guys all talk about the inspired moment where you knew something had to change in your newsroom and where it took your work?
I don't mind starting with that, Aimee. So we started with the goal this year of really starting to transform our sites into a community portal. And so if you think about community for us has information, but it also has journalism. And so we got to a point where we were talking about, okay, well, how do we get the information? Because we want our journalists to write journalism. You referred to that when you were talking about the AP and automated insights. We want them investigating. We want them out in the community. We want them conducting interviews. We don't necessarily want them grabbing the high school sports scores to populate a scoreboard. It's great information, but that is not where their skill base is or where their talents lie. And so we got to a point where we said, well, how can we use tools that are out there to start to bring that information into our sites to where we really do have a community portal? And we landed on the topics that you mentioned, real estate, the high school sports, because those were areas that we saw traffic, we saw engagement, we saw people coming to our site. We weren't covering it the way we wanted to be able to cover it, but when we did, we saw that people gravitated towards it. And so that was where we started with those topics.
Pedro, what happened at the Marshall Project? How did you bring all of those analytics together to be able to automate and help them understand what their audience was interested in?
Sure, yeah. So I was the engagement editor when I was at the Marshall Project, and I figured that I was doing kind of the same reports every month or so, with like grabbing the same metrics, visiting different dashboards on Facebook, on Twitter, etc. So what I did was trying to automate this process to give some sense, to get different tools and metrics and put in the same place in the same report for other people in the newsroom. So instead of using just dashboards that not all people would understand, or having to visit Twitter analytics or Facebook, etc., I put in the same report, and I basically coded all the insights. So if this number is getting up, this is good news, or etc. So I basically automated a written report for the rest of the newsroom. So what triggered me to try this was basically, as you said, necessity or maybe laziness, that I didn't want to repeat myself with the same reports and to code all the insights that I could get.
Yeah, I think that annoyance part is something newsrooms should be aware of like, what is the most irritating thing of my day, and to identify that and address it in some way. Jay, I know that you were working in a co-working space with people who are working on artificial intelligence. Can you talk about how Lead AI came together and what kind of maybe annoyance you were trying to alleviate from your newsroom and others?
Yeah, I for sure. I mean, I was fortunate enough to sort of be AI adjacent for several years. I knew what it was, but I hadn't worked in it. I just had we had a hunch it was going to be something that was going to matter to journalism, but we just didn't know for sure. And we did. We continue to work in a co-working space, and that allowed us to have that very cliche water cooler conversation where we started to talk about we should try something together. And the thing that we decided to try as in partnership was to set our sights on the fact that there's a gigantic gap between the number of high school sports contests that occur on any given day or week in any given area, but in our case, it was the state of Ohio. And there's a massive gap between the amount of coverage that can practically be done by humans and the number of games that are covered. And every one of those games, in our view, has a small audience that cares very deeply about the result. Those are the parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts and friends. And, quite frankly, they live in the demographic of local news subscribers. So we thought, well, that we don't have a perfect problem to solve, but we have a suitably imperfect problem to solve. And we just got to work on it and said, well, let's see if we could figure that out. And we set the goal of being able to cover every game in the state of Ohio all at once while our editors were sleeping, so that they could go out and our sports department could do more work around features and athletes and stories around high school athletics that were more complex than necessarily a game result. Because the half-life on those stories is much longer than sort of the attention span relative to the game itself. And so we looked at it from that perspective and just tried to solve a problem for ourselves and wondered whether or not we could do it. It was really there was some annoyance, but there was just sort of a sense of curiosity, like, well, what if we tried this and what would it look like if it worked?
Was it difficult to step off the ledge when you say, to be curious, to be like, it does feel like you're kind of walking into the abyss?
There's definitely a moment. I mean, there were definitely moments of uncertainty in the, but I think what was key for us is that our team has always been very experimental. One of our corporate values is to try, learn, and repeat. So we have a corporate culture here, or an organizational culture that is based in experimentation, and we're pretty risk tolerant. So we failed at dozens of things. We've tried lots of things that didn't work very well. So we were fortunate in growing up in a culture here that valued experimentation and curiosity.
And not to dwell on the failure, but like maybe we could call it a learning experience. What can you just explain briefly an experiment that you learned a lot from, but it's just not going to see prime time?
Well, we're not exactly sure whether it will or not, but we've something that we're really interested in that we haven't figured out how to make it work yet, and we've had some learning experiences around it. We think that there's something there inside of high school sports results where there's a desire for analysis of why teams are doing well and why other teams or programs are not doing well. And we think there's something in the data there that would enable us to create lists or rankings that human editors would be able to, because they come to the understanding of, we know why this team is really good. The data shows us that this team starts really fast and pulls away and wins, because historically this has happened, for 27 of the last 32 weeks. We think there's something there in the data that would allow us to give that ranking information to editors and allow them to now begin to write really valuable analysis around why things are happening in a high school sports league or in a metro area that isn't being written now because it's too hard to parse the data. And we're inspired by all of the discussion around, like, let's say SEC football. Everybody wants to know why Alabama is good, or why Georgia's better than Alabama, or what's wrong with Tennessee. There's just massive amounts of discussion around that. Well, a lot of that is based in the rankings, and we're curious around, like, whether that could be something that we might be able to deliver value to newsrooms that would give their sports people something to write about. But we're just not there yet. Like, we've tried it several different times and we've been dissatisfied with the results thus far. And what we've learned from that is that those learning opportunities, those failures, the places where it didn't work as intended, are great scaffolds to sort of build on. And it's okay that it didn't work right the first time. It's totally okay that it didn't work right the first time. The challenge, I think, is, and then I'll shut up, is that journalism fails in public. Every time we publish something, like, we're failing in front of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. So the key point is to be able to create an environment for yourself where you can test and iterate in private and have the best possible solution when you do ultimately go public, because that's something very different around our work. And the bigger that we get, or the bigger that a deployment of AI gets. Look at the AP. You go 10x on earning reports, you get those earning reports wrong, you got 10x more stories wrong. So it really puts this critical place I think it puts a criticality around the in-between, between the idea and the deployment, and really being intentional about spending the time in the in-between to get it as good as it can be before you go to deploy, even though there's still that pressure to deploy. Like,
I think one of the things
uncomfortable place.
One of the things we've already learned preliminarily through our scorecard is that a lot of newsrooms can't financially afford to experiment. They're, because failure could mean, the closing of that newsroom. And so I think you have to have that curiosity gene. You also have to have that tolerance to learn and pick yourself up and try again. And I'm thinking here of Cynthia with McClatchy. You have 29 newsrooms, but you didn't deploy all three of these tools across all of them. Can you tell us a little bit about the process that went into to choosing the newsrooms that you did, and some of the findings that you've already had from it?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's a great question. So at McClatchy, we have about 6 newsrooms that we consider are large, and then we have the rest, which we have medium and small. And so it was really important that we didn't just experiment in the large newsrooms, because that is a place where we do have more resources. And so it might be easy to say, hey, this doesn't work all the way we wanted, but we have someone that can finish it off, or we have someone that can go the extra mile. It was really important to test these tools out in smaller newsrooms where we don't have a lot of bodies, to really see if there is a help there, if we can prove the case that this is helping to supplement. One of my favorite experiments that we are still currently running is in Biloxi. And so we worked with a data visualization vendor called Hi George. I think they just changed their name to Data Herald. But basically, this allows a data visualization library. Anyone can log in, look at what is available. And with us, they basically would copy some code and make an embed in our CMS and be able to publish. And we tried this in a large newsroom. We tried it in Sacramento, but we also tried it in Biloxi. And I think the results really surprised all of us, because we assumed, okay, Sacramento, large newsroom, they're going to take it, they're going to run with it, they're going to fly, and Biloxi, will see what happens. But in Biloxi, they really embraced it, because they don't have a data visualization reporter. They don't have a data reporter, right? And so this filled a gap, which is something that I think we've all talked about. Don't just experiment to experiment, identify the gap. They didn't have a way to create these data visualizations, but now they had a tool that allowed quick embeds. They could just log into the library. They were easy to understand and they were easy to use. And so they started basically building content based on the maps alone. We launched around July with them, June or July, which is right when the COVID surge, I can't remember which number, I think it was the fourth surge, started in Mississippi. And so what they started doing was just going and grabbing hospitalization rates, vaccination rates by county, and actually using those visualizations to write stories faster than kind of waiting for the health department, waiting for the numbers. We don't have anybody to crunch the numbers right now. We're a small newsroom. And so it really allowed them to dive deep and to start using these pretty much on any story, because they were helping to tell the story of what was going on with COVID in those counties. They started seeing 2.5 times higher engagement on stories when they were including those data visualizations, increased page views per story. And so we really started to see that even in newsrooms that you might think there's not a lot of resources there, they were able to use that, and they really attached to this tool to use it as a way to supplement. And it kind of went off, but I do want to add one more thing, is that in that newsroom, I think it helped them understand that AI was a supplement. So this was not, they were not here to take the jobs. In fact, they could not. Even with the data visualizations, you still need a reporter to say, here, we're giving you, county by county vaccination rates, or we're giving you what we have. Now we're looking at more gas and other things like that. But that was a way for us to really see what would this look like in a newsroom that doesn't have a bunch of resources. And so it was really important for us to kind of spread out those tests across our 3 levels.
And have you thought about, now that you're 6 months into this project, roughly, for all 3 of these different initiatives, have you thought like, okay, all 29 are going to get this, or you're still waiting and seeing?
So we're still slowly rolling. I'll say that. So we definitely have increased the data visualization, and I think it helped us define where we wanted to go next, right? So instead of thinking all the big newsrooms, we need this, we kind of thought, what happens if we start to give this to our small and medium newsrooms first, to see how they're able to use it and come up with new ways of usage. So I think that we are still going market by market instead of just throwing it all out there.
Yeah, I keep thinking about Yoda and size matters not. And Jay's project, you're in Ohio, Jay. You're not on one of the seaboard. You're not on the eastern or western seaboard where all of this, fancy AI development is going on. And Pedro, you're in a giant city, but I still feel like you've brought really powerful tools to smaller operations. Can you guys talk about that in terms of the size? Like, Jay, what are you doing in AI in Ohio?
I think you really hit on a key thing. And one of the things that we really try to keep at the center of the work that we're doing is the number one, that this was literally developed in a newsroom, in cooperation with an AI team, but it was developed in a newsroom. And we feel like that is really important. And the other piece is that there's an advantage to being in the Midwestern United States. For our global friends, you may not be as familiar with this, but most folks in the US are. I mean, the Midwest is known for being pretty humble and self-effacing. And I think that humility and an acknowledgement that you don't have all the answers, but you've recognized that this is a tidal, kind of a tectonic shift in the way that people are going to interact with information, has been really critical to the way that we've developed the product. We've never said that it was going to change journalism forever. We've never looked at it like a thing that was completely finished. And I think having our journalists and our reporters and editors really involved in the development of the product has helped us always keep readers, reporters, and communities at the center of this, right? And it helps to have your newsroom remind you that the news organizations all over the globe have an opportunity right now to sort of take ownership of AI and the way it's deployed in their organizations, and to exercise some control over that we didn't exercise with the platforms, and that we And that created real challenges for the news ecosystem across the globe. We have a chance to get this right, and this is why frankly, I'm really excited to be here with these folks to talk about it from that perspective, because it's early and we have a chance to get it right and to really keep the right people at the center of the conversation. And so it's helped to be small, frankly, Aimee, because you're looking at the decision maker. So coming out of a newsroom, we get to decide what we want the product to be and the way we want the product to behave. And we might, who knows, we could be washed over tomorrow. Like there could be a huge thing that will happen and all of a sudden the product has no value anymore. But we'll know that we will know that we tried to approach it from the perspective of keeping the right things at the center and having some perspective about it. So yeah, I'm glad not to be a tech bro on the coasts right now. I'm glad for that.
Aimee, can I add something to what Jay said? I think it's so important, even in all the experiments we had, we identified an editor on the ground to work with each of these vendors. And so it wasn't just myself who works across all 29, right? Coming in and saying, we're going to use AI. Here it is. Here's a tool. I went in and said, who's the best editor to work on high school sports? Who's the best person? Who's the go-to person for real estate? And I think that gives newsrooms, like Jay was saying, really empowers them to say, this is wrong, or this didn't come over right. We really wouldn't cover it that way. Or let me tell you what the most important high schools are, or let me tell you this region that we're not able to cover. That would be great if you could, because we know there's a gap. And so they really are the experts. And so I think if you lead with having them understand and tell you, this is what we're not able to cover, or this is what we know will do well, it really helps to make them a partner. And then it's not seen as, here comes tech coming into our small newsroom to tell us how to change things.
Yeah, just adding to what Jay and Cynthia said. So one of the projects that I'm most proud of working on was the Fatima bot, which is a fact-checking bot that works on Twitter, which was co-developed with Aos Fatos, which is a small newsroom, a fact-checking agency here in Brazil, like 10, 15 people. And I presented the idea of this bot in a gathering called like Beer and Data. It was at Google News Initiative, a thing that happened in Brazil every couple of months or so. And so I presented the idea in one of these lightning talks, and the founder of Aos Fatos was in the audience, and she said, well, could we make this work? And I said, yeah. And so I worked with them directly with the founder and then with some editors to make the thing works. So it basically, I was spotting a problem in terms of journalism, not in creating the stories, but distributing it. So we create all these fact checkings, important fact checkings, but we don't reach the people that are actually spreading the falsehoods. So what I did was basically automating something that when someone spread a URL that we know it's false, and that person has a lot of following and it has a lot of engagement, that tweet. So the bot would directly talk to the person, point to a fact checking done by Aos Fatos. So it was a simple, basically the mechanics were simple, but it was a pretty cool idea and they wanted to try. And so being in the community, like being in the newsletter community from or attending this festival or things like that. So if you're part of this, you will learn about interesting projects and case studies. And I said, well, this could happen in my newsroom, even if it's small. What do I need to start something like that in my newsroom? So one thing that I would say to folks is, if you are like interested, try to go into those places. The community of data journalism, of AI and stuff, they are very welcoming to new people that want to learn. And you find things that will be useful in your newsroom, whatever the size.
Yeah, I think Jay said during our prep for this session, subscribe to 5 newsletters. Isn't that something, Jay, that you had said?
Yeah, I think it is like if I subscribed to 5 newsletters about footwear, I would become much more footwear expert adjacent, right? And you don't have to know how to code or be a data scientist to understand how AI can impact your life. So it's about like taking just get near it, you know, spend some time with things like, I don't know, Google's priority inbox, and watch how AI simplifies your inbox and helps clean things up, you know, or just get a little closer to it. And you don't have to understand all of the, like, what is a neural net? That's beyond what journalism needs right now. Like, there's people working on that. There's no question about it, and it'll probably affect us someday. But what we are in right now is very much like practical math. You know, this is about how to use automation to make your life a little easier and a little better, and to serve your community a little bit more freely. And if you kind of like go at it with the acknowledgement that there are people that are building your neural nets, they're out there, they're making things that are going to blow minds. And we just don't know what those things are going to be and how they're going to be applied to med tech and fintech and all these other things that all of us are not that concerned with, but they're part of our daily lives. But just getting a little closer to it, like the journalism. I mean, I know I'm plugging Journalism AI, but the Institute has a great newsletter, and it's a great place to start. And there's other newsletters out there that plug ours. You know, we have one we send out once a month, and it's just curated. It's 5 interesting things that are happening in AI and journalism, and that's all it is. But it's one of those deals where if you kind of get a little bit closer to it, you're going to start to pick it up as you move along, and it helps make it a little bit less. I mean, the core root emotion around AI and newsrooms right now is probably fear. It's probably not curiosity.
I want to talk about emotion, because I think it's huge, because some of these technologies, I don't want to say they're easy. As Pedro mentioned, you know, some of the things were easy, like the automations of certain things. But, you know, what we've seen already in our local news AI readiness scorecard, very common things among newsrooms of all types and all sizes, that when it comes to using automation and AI, they say make it affordable, make it easy to use, and make it easy to maintain. I see Cynthia nodding to that. And that easy part, some have said, is a requirement because staff can be resistant to the new. So sometimes new technologies can be the easy part. It's getting staff on board that can be tricky. So what are the emotional components to adopting AI and earning staff trust? And Pedro, I don't know if with Los Fatos, if you had to get some people over that hump, or if everybody was like ready to jump with you.
I think I kind of in the early stages, I presented clearly what would be the benefits. So we are going to reach audiences that we aren't reaching yet. So this was we weren't going to basically cut jobs or anything like that. So I think the benefit was clear, and I think that has to be put up front. So you need to state what is the benefit to everyone. And also, as you said, having buy-in from the upper echelons, it's important as well. So I think those two things might be interesting. Having someone in the newsroom that understands something about computational thinking and automation, even it can be very important. The person doesn't need to understand everything, the innards of every program, every code, etc. But if it understands what it's doing, it makes it easier to be like the ambassador to explain to other people in the newsroom. So having this point of contact and buy-in, it's a great step toward like taking the fear out of the equation and making people see the clear benefits.
I'll add, I think for us, I would say transparency and partnership. So we were very transparent from the start, not just internally, but also externally. So our byline on these stories or this information is whatever the market is bot. So we have a SAC-B bot, we have a Charlotte Observer bot, Miami Herald bot, and we also have a disclaimer at the bottom to explain to our readers who, you know, how this was written, how it was created. And we have an email address where they can email us and share their thoughts, or if they have questions. And I will say we get feedback through that. Mostly we've had a lot of people asking for additional information. So if it's high school roundup, hey, you didn't cover this school, can you extend? And in most cases we've been able, because again, we're working with Jay and it really is machine learning, to say, yeah, we can, we'll have it next week. We definitely have those who are going to correct the grammar. And they're going to tell us if they missed something or if the bot was incorrect about that. So that's great. But we've also opened it up internally too. And so I'll hear from reporters. I receive questions from editors. But I think just the fact that we were very transparent in every newsroom to say, this is what we're going to test. This is how long we're testing it. This is what we're going to be looking for to see whether it works. And then the partnership of having an editor in that room that can work with the vendors. And all of the vendors that we've worked with have been very open to receiving feedback. And I think that helps. And so at first there was a lot of hesitancy from like, well, can I tell them this is wrong? And it's like, absolutely, you have to tell them, because for us in both of our, well, really in all three, the more feedback you give, the better the bot can learn and the better that the bot can start to really understand what's important and how to frame, the information and have it be as close as possible to what one of our writers would create. And so I think that helped internally to have that editor who could say to someone who was really skeptical, like, no, like I told them that was wrong. And then the next week we worked on it and it was fixed. And so I think those two things have been how we've started to build some of that trust, as well as show, hey, this is the intent. We're doing what we said we were going to do. And again, like you mentioned this, Aimee, we're hitting the 6-month point. We'll take a step back and we'll review and figure out where we are.
Yeah, so Jay, you and Cynthia have worked together with Lead AI. From the vendor point of view, what is your onboarding process like, and how do you handle that emotional component to get people to settle in to the idea that this isn't taking over their job, but really filling an information component, not a journalism component?
So the first thing that we really try to do is make sure that we understand the need of the client. What is the goal that you're trying to accomplish, right? And where are you trying to go? And then I think the second thing that has helped us, and frankly, understand that we're making this up as we're going along, right? So, but one of the things that we've learned has been very helpful is we are very transparent about what we are learning, and we publish that regularly. So when we learn a new thing in our own newsroom around a way that we can use the tool that we've developed to help other newsrooms, we share that immediately. And we share it publicly, and we show exactly how the audiences behaved and what did they do differently and how did we use this. And the idea here is to if you're open and you're not if you're coming to a conversation open, you're coming at it with a degree of vulnerability and just sort of understanding that, look, what we're trying to do is do for you what we've done for our own newsroom. And so our newsroom tends to lead on the success side because we're doing it first, right? We're experimenting in our own newsroom with our own folks and our own schools. And so when we have a victory, we're able to share that with our clients and go, here's what happened. It's not what we are going to tell you is going to happen or what is, magically going to happen. This is actually what happened when we did that. And what we're able to find is that helps take the emotional, it kind of helps take the emotional volume down a few notches and look at it like we're going to be right here with you. We are using the exact same tool that we're telling you will work for you. And I think that really helps. Again, this is the advantage of having developed it in a newsroom. And then because it just sort of takes the emotional volume down. But the other piece that we found has been really important is listen and respond, right? People are used to think about your comment sections under your articles. People are used to shouting into the void. And the first rule of engagement, Joy Mayer will tell you this at Trusting News is, if you want to build trust with your audience, they have to feel like they're listened to and that you're going to respond to them in a way that respects them and they feel respected and heard and that they have ownership over their question or their concern. We're just trying to use Joy Mayer's principles in how we deal with our clients. And that's meant a lot. I can say with real brief example, the on-the-ground editor at McClatchy in one of the markets that we're testing at started out, like you could tell he was a little prickly about the solution. He wasn't exactly sure it was the right idea. And he has become the greatest. He has become the greatest. I don't want to use the term advocate, but he's become so valuable in our development of the product and how it's delivered and the way that we're looking at language and little tiny details that even our editors missed. I mean, he's been awesome. And what we've developed is, and I think what we ended up with was, I think that relationship thawed and became more collaborative when he realized that we were actually hearing his comments and then changing it that week. And so this is just all about like responsiveness and respect in a situation when you can acknowledge that one of the core emotions at play right now is fear and insecurity. And so you have to acknowledge that elephant is in the room and then behave accordingly.
Right, because we're not
the way we're looking at it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, because it's just like in real life, people want to be heard and listened to and responded to with hopefully some kindness. And I think it's easy for us to all get caught up into tools and what can tools do for us, but you can't go anywhere if you have resistance. We have a question. It's from Brazil. I think, Pedro, you've brought a Brazilian contingency, which is always one of my favorites. But it actually ropes in everybody on this call because the question is, do the McClatchy tools work well in Portuguese? What impact can they have in Brazil? Jay, this is a whole new market for you. Brazil is a giant country that really loves soccer. So if you can get a WhatsApp integration, I think, and Pedro's your guy, and then Cynthia, you can work with them on all of that. So anyway, who wants to go first on that one?
I'll go first. Language.
Okay, go ahead, Jay.
Right? I mean, so I think the first thing we have to acknowledge is natural language and dialects are really hard. And we do some work. We do some work for a client in Europe now, and we are doing, actually, Pedro, we probably need to talk because we're doing some exploratory things in South America right now. But what we're finding is the central problem to solve is how do you communicate with people in not the language that is taught in the books, but the language that they actually speak. I mean, just take the way that we communicate on Twitter. We make up words on Twitter all the time. And so, like, if you want it to be natural, it's just an enormously complicated situation. And again, you just kind of go back to create some space for you to figure it out and simplify it as much as you can before you go live with it. I'm going to turn it over to Pedro because I don't speak Portuguese, and I just know that English is complicated. I cannot even imagine how complicated it would be to approach Portuguese.
Yeah, it's one of the big problems in natural language processing, which is how to make like something that it could be mistaken by a person writing or saying. So what we do right now is basically create like interesting or well-written templates that will take information that is already structured data, and do stories. Gabriela, she's asking, she's like a big, like great data reporter here in Brazil, and she actually did a project that took the data from the elections, because in Brazil it's everything kind of, we have the API for the elections, and we know in the same day what happened, who had the exact number of votes, so we can automate who was elected in each and every of the cities. So they developed something that would give small stories on the elections, the election night. But it was all pre-written templates that wasn't using generated, like we are seeing big advancements in GPT-3, the OpenAI and things that would generate text given a brief prompt. And this is, I think this is a big development, and this is something that people are kind of fearful. There was an interesting article in the Washington Post a couple of days ago on how the text generated by an AI can be like the first draft of a story. So when you write a story, you're basically editing your own thoughts. So some people put a lot of stuff, free flow of thought on the screen, and then cuts and rewrites and put and change the order and stuff like that. So I think there is a way that OpenAI and those things can be used as first drafts of stories, and we're just starting to see that. The Washington Post story was Gay Talese was seeing a story, and he was grading as like a good example of a story that he could have written himself. So I think there's big developments, but just on the beginning, I think the language barrier is still a big problem, but only if we acknowledge that we don't want the computer to write everything, and we don't want, if we have like human oversight, we can have the computer doing part of the job, and then we're just fixing everything.
Yeah, so I was going to say I cannot speak to the Portuguese because that is not a language that we have tested. We do have a Spanish language translation tool that we're working with in a few markets. And so I would say if we were able to publish, that the content in English, then we could work with the Spanish language. It's not an AI tool, but we could work with that partner to translate it into Spanish. But I would say for Gabriela that the information and those tools can scrape. And so if you have, I'm thinking at least about like Hi George and Data Herald, we were working with United Robots, and Jay could speak to this, but if you have a URL, I believe you could work with them on how to scrape the data, but I don't know that, I can't speak for them about being able to then translate it into Portuguese. But great question.
Yeah, language is a huge issue with computers in general and technology, but I think it's going to get thornier. But there, like I said, there's a lot of Brazilians. There's a lot of people like Pedro and Gabriela who are engaged and invested, and so I have high hopes. We are at time. I didn't stick my landing like I like to do right at the top of the hour, but you guys, thank you so much for your insights, for your work, for your fearlessness, for being able to jump off the cliff and take a bunch of people with you. You guys were all flying high, and I appreciate the time that you took today. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Paulus and Google News Initiative for doing this. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks from me too. This has been a wonderful conversation, and I extend also thanks to Aimee and the AP team for co-designing and co-hosting this session with us. It's really been a pleasure of a long-standing collaboration. So thanks again to Aimee, Jay, Cynthia, and Pedro for this fantastic session that closes day 3, of this Journalism AI festival. So we are over the halfway mark at this point. We still have, if I'm not wrong, 7 amazing sessions waiting for you Thursday and Friday. So keep tuning in to the festival and the live stream on YouTube. And about those sessions, we have 4 of them tomorrow. It's going to be a packed day. We start in the Asia Pacific region with another session of our collab challenges with the 2 teams and speakers from, let me see if I get it right, India, Singapore, and Hong Kong, telling us about the work they have done together to experiment on the question of how might we use AI and audience insights to design more relevant and interactive news narratives. We continue with a session from Code for Africa. So speakers this time from South Africa, continuing our global journey. And they will tell us about a tool they've built to battle disinformation using machine learning. After that, a much awaited session with some great tech reporters from Europe and the US about holding AI accountable. So how do we actually tell the stories about AI other than just using AI for journalism? So looking forward to the session with Melissa, Surya, Uli, and Marina as well. And we're going to close the session with another co-design conversation, in this case with the folks at Partnership on AI, who will discuss about how bridging AI ethics and journalistic standards with another great lineup of speakers. So as you can see, quite an amazing lineup waiting for you tomorrow as well. So tune in back to the Journalism AI Festival for day 4. That brings us to the end of this session and of this day as well. So thank you everyone for joining online. Thanks for the questions throughout the day and for the engagement with the participants. And thanks to all the speakers of today's session for the amazing insights. All the videos are available on YouTube right after the session, so you can already review anything you may have missed from the first 3 days of the week. And with that, I think I can stop talking and close day 3 of the Journalism AI Festival. So thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.